Let's see. Yeah, I think we're okay.
Hello.
Yeah, everyone just check their mic real quick to make sure we don't freak anything out.
Okay.
As long as we're not peaking, we're okay.
Yo. Should we all try to maintain the same level? Like, let's all hit like right in between yellow and green the entire time.
Yeah.
Between yellow and green like this? Is this good?
Yep, that's good. Yeah, we'll mix it again. See, the great thing about this is I'm actually rolling already, so
Cool.
these are the outtakes.
And then he'll separate us all out.
I know. All right.
Yeah, we're gonna. Hey, welcome to episode.
Yeah, 15 is what we're on.
I guess we are audio, so I guess I should because this is gonna be on the internet. So, we are now at episode 15 of Bleeps and Bloops, and I'm here with a group on site. So we are at Fantastic Fest Arcade, and it'll probably be easiest for everyone to go down and introduce themselves. But of course, I'm here with Dave. So Dave, say hi.
Hi.
we're sharing a mic, so we're recording video. If you can't see it, there's also video, and you can probably find that through links on our social stuff. But why don't we just go down the line and say who you are and what you do and why you're here at Fantastic.
My name is Rich Vreeland. I go by Disaster Piece. I've scored a lot of video games, and I also have a film here that I scored that's screening.
I'm Jukio Kallio, or also known as Kozilek, and I made music for games called Nuclear Throne and Luftrausers.
My name is Stephen Clark. I make games. I'm a sometime musician. I got my MFA in game design recently, and I'm here because my game Rooftop Cop is in the little arcade laptop section. So.
My name is Troupe Gammage. I do game music and sound and voiceover and stuff, and I'm here as the obligatory Austin musician, native.
And I'm Tom Francis. I'm a game designer, programmer, and I guess I'm not really a sound designer, but I do the sound design for my games. And my last game was Gunpoint, and my next one is Heat Signature.
And Troop was nice enough. We booked Troop a few weeks ago as a normal guest, and they're like, "Hey, so can you share your time with all these other people?"
So I'm waiting for my accolades. Sorry.
So
Keep me
I appreciate
praised.
that. So normally we'll do like news, like industry news, and we'll talk about it. But because there's so many of us here, I thought it would be more useful for us to sort of talk about each other's games and talk about game audio, than to talk about news and stuff and take up some of our time. So. I know I have a list of questions. Dave, do you have anything off the top? And I can sort of reference my questions so I'm not fumbling with my phone.
Yeah, sure. So the cool thing about bringing all of us together today is that almost all of us are showing something here. So I think it would be cool to hear a little bit about the game that you're showing or the film that you're showing here, and pimp it a little bit, I guess, as the kids say. Yeah. So, and I know, Tom, your game, you just had a big kind of reveal a couple of days ago. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Heat Signature is a top-down space stealth game. It's basically a game about spaceships where you can go inside the spaceships. So your
so meta.
like it's this tiny little pod, and everyone else has these huge randomized hulking spaceships. And you fly up to them, and then you dock with them onto their airlock, and then you sneak inside. Basically, you hack your way in, and then all of their crew are patrolling their corridors, and all of the systems of the ship are there for you to mess around with, and it becomes like a stealth game for hiding from the crew, beating them up, hijacking the ship if you like, or blowing up parts of it, stealing things from it, that kind of stuff. And the way I work is to make a prototype by myself using Game Maker or Unity or something like that, in this case Game Maker, and I do all my own rubbish placeholder art. I do whatever sound effects I can find on freesound.org, and no music. And then I just show that to the world. Once the game is working, once the actual functionality is there and it's fun to play, then I show it to everybody and I say, hey, does anyone want to help me with the art or the music or both? And do kind of an open call for submissions. That's what I did with Gunpoint, which was my first game. And I did it that way because I had no connections or anything. I had no money. I was asking people to help me. It was going to be a free game at that point. And in the end, we ended up selling it. And so we did a revenue share thing with all the people who helped me. This time, I am going to pay the people I'm working with, but I still did the open submission thing just because it worked so well last time. And yeah, just yesterday, I announced who I'm working with. And the two composers are Alex Burnett and Ivan Semidolin. and the artist is John Roberts, who happens to be the same guy who did the art on Gunpoint, but he's working with like people doing samples and showing you their portfolios and stuff. I just go purely by the sample or the work. And for art, it happened to be the same guy, a completely different style, just did this incredible sample, just blew my mind. And I've shown it now on my blog, and everyone else pretty much agrees with me. And they're just saying, what? How is it this good? And the composers are two people I've never worked with before. And they just each had a really unique style that perfectly suited different parts of the game. I want the game to have two different kind of moods to it. One where you're flying through space and you're just alone, you're in your own little pod. It's kind of your home in this universe. You know, it's where you're kind of safe and just flying around in comfort. And so for that, I kind of want it to be about the kind of serenity of space and the sort of majesty of the amazing galaxy you're flying through. So there's these huge like vapor clouds, and it's really colorful. And Alex Burnett did the best sample for that. Just had this like beautiful kind of transcendent music that just makes you feel, you know, at peace. And then as soon as you dock with a ship and you board it and you go inside, suddenly you're in this really hostile place and everyone's out to get you. You are trying to plan how you're going to get through it. You have you will eventually have a set of like tools, various weapons, different like kind of gadgets to mess around with this kind of stuff. And I got a lot of really cool samples of music from various candidates that was kind of about quite actiony music, some quite stealthy music, and all of them really sold you on kind of how dangerous this place was and how threatened you are and how difficult it was going to be. And, you know, it's just a very tough situation. And the reason I liked Ivan's sample so much was that it was the only one that made me feel dangerous. Like it's really emphasizes the cool part of it. And so when you're boarding the ships, you actually feel like you can do this. Like, this is going to be fun. I'm going to actually like sneak through this really difficult, hostile situation and come out on top.
You know, I was actually going to ask you about your choice to do it that way. And right, is it the fact that you didn't know composers and sound designers and artists? Was that more of a factor of you tend to kind of hang out in your cave and work, or was it you're out networking, meeting other developers, but audio people weren't present?
So originally with Gunpoint, I didn't really know any composers like personally, and so I did it for that reason. But since then, I worked with 3 different composers on Gunpoint, so I knew all of them, and they're all fantastic and wonderful to work with. But for Heat Signature, I always feel like the project itself is always going to have very different requirements, and there's really no shortage of really talented composers who could do a great job. Like, all of the people who worked on Gunpoint could do a fantastic job on Heat Signature. And I just wanted to make sure I got the absolute best person, because there's a lot of back and forth. I don't work in an office with people in person. We always work via email or Skype, and I usually work with people all over the world. And that's great, but it does mean there's sort of a limit on the bandwidth of your communication. They're not going to be running every decision by me. I'm not going to be checking up on them all the time. I'm not always going to be able to tell them every thought I have about the game and everything about how it's going to work. And so, because the communication is somewhat limited, it's really, really important to have people who just get it first time. Just like their first instinct on the project is exactly what you want and matches your taste perfectly. And that's something that really isn't that closely related to talent. Like, the standard of submissions I got was just absolutely amazing. And I wouldn't say that people I picked are more talented than people I've worked with in the past. There's just like a threshold where once you're above that level of talent, you're just brilliant. And you can just do like basically anything I asked of you, but it's still going to take a lot of back and forth to find the exact right style. And it will with anyone, even the perfect person. But I'd like to minimize that as much as possible because we have this kind of communication bottleneck, and because I also I just feel really guilty asking for changes and stuff. And like every time I have to tell a really, really talented person who can do something I can never do in my dreams to say like, oh, your sample is really good, but I need you to change this about it. Like, you have to do that, and it'll always involve a certain amount of that. But the more of it you have to do, the more kind of more of an asshole I feel. The more kind of I get quite depressed about it because I'm like, oh god, it's done this amazing thing, but it's just not quite what I want. So as much as possible, I want to work with people who just have the same instincts as me, who have a knack for just understanding what this game is going to be about and getting it right first time, so that we can minimize that.
Yeah, and maybe as kind of a follow-up question for everyone, there's an interesting, I don't know, maybe paradigm shift right now where people are either having these open calls and it's, you get to be a part of the game, and that's your compensation, or there's one composer that's picked and you're paid to work with them, or you have an open call but you pay them. So there's like there's three different ends of the spectrum. Where do you all find kind of things going as we move forward?
In general, I'm not, or my experience with that has mostly been in voiceover stuff with like Voice 123 and things like that are sort of websites that are built for that. It'd be interesting if there was a game version, like game music version of that might emerge at some point. But I had never had great experience with that because the lack of the human connection. And I think like if you're just doing it one-to-one, it's like you get submissions and then you're finding those people. But when there's like this faceless machine and entity, it's rare that you get feedback on your submissions. It's rare that you really have any. It's very opaque, and a lot of times it's really frustrating to do like 10 things, and you might have been the number 2 guy on all 10 of them, but you just don't really know, and you're not given the opportunity to make the changes as you talked about, which I think I love that approach, but I think it is, as a composer or as the person who's creating this stuff, sometimes that can be sort of a frustrating. It's a tough way to break in, as opposed to like just meeting someone at a thing and they're like, hey, I need some music for my thing, and you make it. It's like, oh, it's a small time deal. It's like game, it's a free game. It's like your music is only doing a few songs, and then you kind of build from there and establish. It's like it's much more of a dice roll. So I don't know that will ever be something that is a way to, except for the very few lucky ones, to actually like establish a career. But I think it's an interesting alternative, and it's a way for people to get experience, and you still build up your portfolio by doing awesome submissions that just didn't get picked. There's still a bunch of people who made great space music. Yeah,
because it feels like this is a conversation that comes up on a forum or Facebook group once a week or once a month, and everyone's doing things a little bit differently, but in interesting ways. So it's cool to hear your approach versus maybe the way that you guys did. So Stephen, how did you handle the audio development in Rooftop Cop?
So, I mean, I was originally a musician, and I started learning how to program a couple of years ago and trying to make games. And so Rooftop Cop is actually my first game that I've made on my own. So, I mean, that was kind of my approach to it. Was like, playing shows was one thing. It was fun, but the music that I made needed another context. So it was like, should try making games. They are a thing that I've always loved. So in terms of, if you just want to do sound and music, maybe just game jams, just go to those and make things with people. And if there aren't any in your area, organize some. And then community organization becomes like an avenue for, then it helps a lot of people, and then it also sort of helps everybody like work together.
Yeah, you guys were talking in the hall that you've done a game jam together?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
I mean, that's kind of a good example of kind of the process that you were talking about, where you just sort of meet someone and you just want to do something with them. Right. We kind of met through our friend Natalie, who wanted to do a game for the Space Cowboy game
that's
jam.
right. Yeah.
And she just had this little story she wanted to tell, and it's very simple.
Distance, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Put that.
From a programming perspective, it's very simple, and but she just had this very clear vision for it. And I wasn't really going to enter this game jam because I didn't really have time, but she's someone I always wanted to work with, and she, I guess you can...
Yeah, we're friends, so that's how it worked. But to me, like, game jams is the way to go. Like, that's how I started. And I knew Lambier guys who I work with. But basically, like, yeah, game jams is the way to go, I think.
And for stuff like that, when it's going to be a short-term project that you're just going to finish and then you're going to release it, I'm much happier to just go with somebody I know and just, like, use connections and stuff like that. But for the bigger project, when it's like it's going to take 2 or 3 years to make a game, it's more important to make sure you have someone that is going to be exactly right for it. And B, I kind of wanted it to be. I mean, you're right that it's definitely frustrating for a lot of composers to, if they do take the time to make a sample and then it isn't selected, then it's frustrating, of course. And I made that not a requirement this time. If you didn't want to do a sample, just send me a portfolio and I'll figure it out. In fact, one of the very final people I was thinking of choosing didn't do a sample. He just had some music that was perfect. But I kind of wanted intentionally to make it open to people who didn't have those connections, who aren't at these shows and don't get a chance to know me personally or have friends of friends that I might know, and just find people who've never done it before or have never done it professionally before, and make sure that if those people are good enough, they have a way in. And it's a difficult way in, and it is grueling, and I felt terrible having to say no to so many people, but yeah.
Fun fact, I applied for both.
Yes, and your stuff was awesome.
Nice.
So you said, Steven, that you're a musician. Did you write the music and the sound for Rooftop Cop?
Yeah, I did all of it, which was super fun. And actually, I did the sound last. Like, I did all the rest of the stuff, and then most of the music and sound was done like in June, because I felt most comfortable with that. But yeah, like incorporating that. So originally how the game was shown was inside of a cave, like a cardboard and wood cave that I built out with my friend Neil. And there were 5 separate games, and you went through the cave, and I made like a 25-minute track that just played kind of in the background. So when I came time to like combine them into a single, like there's like a menu thing, and you can kind of like pass between them freely. I wanted to have that sort of cave feeling. So it's sort of like I don't know, I like interior feeling exteriors, so I wanted like that as you're playing it. So the sound and the music from each game sort of, they flow between each other. There's never any break.
Is it similar to the music you were writing when you were just playing shows, or is it a totally different genre style? It's
similar in that I physically made it out of old songs that I made. I took like the actual recordings and re-chunked them into playable things, and then so it's like kind of unrecognizable, but it was like a personal choice for me.
Sure. Do you ever put your Speaks music into any of the game projects you work on?
Yes, and I totally forgot about the fact that we did that, but there was a game I worked on a long time ago, a casual game called Bumble Tales, and the artist was like, "Hey man, how are things going with the band?" It was like Facebook chatting me the other day, and it's like, "Yeah, I still listen to that track that was in the game." And I was like, "We put a track in the game with it," but it was the credits. It was like the credit song basically. But yeah, it's funny because my stuff is so different. The band and the like game, no game would, unless it's just like the soundtrack for FIFA or something. It's like there aren't games that have that kind of music, which I've wanted for a long time to somehow figure out a way to do that, like how to have like a band's music where there are like guitar stems and drums and things like that actually being some way interactive. But for the most part, they're kind of separate worlds, and it's just fun to bring them together. Like I've done NES style remixes of our stuff, or I've done, we made a game for a song that's like kind of what you were talking about, where it's like you need a context for this. There's like a context that you see for the music that can't really be represented in any other way, and so it's like a music game instead of a music video. But it's fun to try to bridge the gap for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know in Infamous Second Son, they had kind of a rock-ish score, but it still was written in more of a score than like, a pop tune or something like that. What's your current project that you're working on?
Yeah, well, we're working on Nuclear Throne with Lambier, but okay. I started a side project by myself called Life on a Mountain, and that's actually down there. You can play it. And yeah, that's all me, like graphics and code and music and sounds and... Was that by was that by choice that you're like, I want to just do my own project, or were you... yeah, the game basically started as a, well, there's two things. Other thing is I'm from Finland, and I love the feeling of coming out from your house in the winter and like smelling this super fresh like snowy air, and that's like, I want to make a game that feels like that. But also I wanted to make because I make music and I sell the soundtracks, and that's basically where I try to get the money from. But I wanted to make a soundtrack, or like a game with a soundtrack that you can't really sell as a soundtrack. I wanted it to be so much part of the game that it's like just stupid to listen to it by itself. So basically, if you want to listen to the songs, you play the game.
So did you have a background in programming, or was it like, I want to make a game, so now I'm going to learn programming, I'm going to learn to do some art?
Yeah. Actually, before I did music professionally, I did a lot of like little games in Game Maker, and it's like, I know my way around it, but I'm not really a like
so like designer. Visual programming.
Yeah, it's more like that. Yeah.
What's wrong with Game Maker?
Yeah,
I love Game Maker.
Yeah, no, Game Maker's great. I started. Yeah. So Rich, what are you up to now? Because I mean, I know you've done some really cool projects in the past. Like, what's the thing that you're excited about that you're working on these days?
Right now, I'm working on this game called Hyperlight Drifter. which I'm starting to get into.
Yep,
Sweet.
me too.
Sweet. Yeah, we kickstarted that game last year and raised a bunch of money, and it's kind of how did I describe it? You're kind of this character who has this disease, and you're trying to like not die, and you're in this world that's been you're in this world that's been like I don't know, bruised and battered in the past, and it's been a few hundred years since like this just crazy like apocalyptic stuff is going on, and the world is kind of in shambles now, and you're going around as a drifter, exploring and trying to kind of, I guess, make sense of that. And so musically, trying to do something that's unique to that project, but also, trying to do something that's unique to that project. One of the things that I always try to do is with each project do something completely different. And I think one of the reasons that I ended up working on Hyperlight Drifter was because of this game Fez that I scored a couple years ago. And so in some senses there's a little bit of expectation there that I'm trying to eradicate. And actually, so this film that's screening at Fantastic Fest this week, the reason that I ended up working on that was also because of Fez. I got an email from the director who had played the game and liked the music, and he temped a bunch of the music from Fez into the film, and kind of developed a relationship to that music, which was good and bad. We were supposed to have like 6 months to complete the film, and then it got into the Cannes Film Festival, which was great, but then we only had 3 weeks to do everything. So I had to write an hour of music in 3 weeks, and that was the most stressful 3 weeks of my life. But the temp score turned out to be really helpful because, here's this framework that the director and the editor and people like painstakingly spent weeks and weeks crafting, like the timings of everything and the mood. So I had all this information to work from, and it kind of like, in some senses, it removed a lot of the back and forth that you were talking about, Tom, because it was like, here's what we want. This is pretty much what we want, and we trust you to kind of make the most of it. And so in a lot of ways, that was great. But one of the ways that it was tough is there were like 4 or 5 cues from the Fez soundtrack in the temp score, and they developed this thing called temp love, which is like, the director falls in love with the temp music, and then you have to compete with that, and it's even
With
more
yourself?
It's even more frustrating.
I can't even believe
You're trying to compete with yourself. This music I wrote like 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm trying to like, do something. I'm not in that place anymore, so I'm trying to do something new.
If you were Disaster Piece, what would you do?
Can you still listen to that music from 4 years ago and enjoy it, or is it just frustrating at this point to listen to it? Not only because you have to compete with yourself per se, but just because you've heard it so much now.
I actually have not listened to it a whole lot since it came out. So when I listen to it now, it's like, oh yeah, that's cool. I wrote that.
Okay, good.
But
good.
yeah, but so what ended up happening is a lot of the things that I tried for the film in those spots where the Fez music was, the director really liked them, but they just weren't as good as like the Fez music was working for him. So I had to try to fix that. And what I ended up doing for some of them was, actually taking the original sessions from Fez and like opening them and being like, how does this work? And then just like kind of like screwing around with it until it was something different enough that it was okay, but still, still work for the movie. So it was a very strange situation.
Has that kind of situation happened with you, Tom, where you temp in some music or sound and then fall in love with it? Despite what you're getting from your audio people?
No.
Okay, well, that's good.
I like you said
stuff.
you just didn't put music in at all.
Yeah, so for music, no, because
that's
I don't put
awesome.
any music in at
Oh,
all.
okay, all right,
And then for art, no, because it's by me. And then the real art is by John Roberts, who's the guy who's done the art for both Gunpoint and now Heat Signature. And he's just that good that nobody misses the old stuff. Like, there's a few people said that the original art for Gunpoint they quite liked back when it was the only art. Like, I would say, oh, don't worry, I'm getting an artist, I'm going to make it much better. And they say, oh, no, I find it quite cute. And then I show them the real art, and I say, oh, no, yeah. Definitely get rid of that shit.
So having 3 weeks to do a score is a kind of a horror story. Does anyone else have any horror stories, whether working with musicians or being a musician yourself, of just like a nightmare?
Was that a pun?
No, unintentional. So yeah, just a horrible experience on either end.
I mean, it's like
So many.
specific examples. Jeez,
Just yeah.
that one. That I love
Without
that,
throwing yourself under the bus, so you never work with those people again.
Okay. No, I'm perfect always. But it's funny to me because I sort of have had that like the temp problem, but it's always like John Williams that people put in it's like, yeah, we want it to sound, or like it's like the most iconic kind of songs, and then people come in and they're like, dude, I can't do like the Star Wars theme, but it's hilarious to me. That truly is like one of the worst things ever, to like just compete against yourself and be different enough from yourself. But and that's a unique experience. I hope to one day have that experience. Yeah.
But it's not as bad as trying to beat John Williams.
It's true.
That sounds like the worst project ever.
John Williams.
Right. And I know I'm just imagining like the guy. It's like, could we actually, the fact that you could do a temp score and then be like, could we actually just get the guy that did this? And like, yeah, sure, I'll call him up and it's like, yeah, this is called John. Yeah, Jai, you want to do like some Star Warsy stuff on this?
I do that all the time. I get emails from people like, yeah, we're really looking for this kind of thing, and they're like, just send me like some bands and stuff. And I'm like, well, have you asked all those bands if they write the music for your game? Because they would do a better job than I would.
Yeah. Right.
I did that actually for I was making originally a game jam game called Floating Point, which is very simple. Like, you're just swinging around on a grappling hook in these randomly generated spaces. And as I was doing it, I was listening to other people's music, just my normal playlist of various bands and stuff. And one song came on that just when it was playing, it just changed the mood of the thing, and it made it much more relaxing and much more kind of meditative. And it was just kind of just changed the whole thing to be a much more pleasant experience. And it was a jam game, so I didn't really couldn't spend a lot of money on it, and I wasn't planning to sell it. In fact, I didn't. But I was thinking, like, maybe I have a lot of composer friends now from Gunpoint. Maybe one of those would be willing to just work on me with this and just try and emulate this guy's style. And I thought, maybe if I just email them and just say, would they want to work on it? And it's just one guy, and he's a Gunpoint fan. So he said, yeah, of course, for sure.
Yeah.
So I ended up releasing that on Steam, and it's a free game. And his music is actually Creative Commons licensed. So actually, I could have done this even without his permission, but he happened to be a fan of my games anyway.
Are there games or projects out there right now that are really inspiring to you on a music audio level that you're playing now? Like, what are you playing now that's really inspiring to you on a audio level?
I honestly just love going to Kickstarter and just looking at those, like just the trailers for all those things, like the amount of quality visually and in terms of audio just for Kickstarter trailers is now like the most inspiring. It's like going to a website that just has like pictures of like fashion or something, and it's like you just get this little taste, and you're just kind of in your mind or like, oh my god, that could be so great, and you can kind of blow up the world into something more vast. But to me, I mean, it's like it's truly there's too many to name. It's like every Kickstarter that's been funded in the past couple of years, I've been like, damn, I can't wait to see the audio for that. Like that soundtrack looks good. Obviously, like I'm stoked for the score for Hyperlight Drifter. Like there's all sorts of awesome stuff that's coming. So I feel like it's just the world has kind of gotten so huge. There's so many indie games with great music. It's not really, there's no one project that's like, oh, BioShock Infinite is like the thing. It's like there's a million things now. So it's cool. Very rich.
Maybe this is the wrong answer, but I kind of I kind of only play games by the Catamites. So he released like a mixtape recently. It's just like 11 it's just like some songs, and then as the song plays, you just play like a game along with the song, and then it goes to the next one, which I thought was just like a really, really nice format for it. And he's doing web games finally, thank God. So, which is like the perfect format for him. But and then really, I guess anything that Doug Wilson is noodling with is always fun to try, because he's always like, he had like I don't know if he has a name for it, but it was all these things hanging from the ceiling, and you like swat at them, and you can, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and he has really good taste in music.
Yeah,
I think
that's true. Doug's a nice guy sometimes.
I know me and Dave have talked about we don't have a lot of time to play games anymore because we're so busy making games and making game audio. So do you guys find the same experience, or are you better at balancing the sort of free time versus making games in your lives?
I find the same thing, and I find that unless I don't want to play games as much as I used to, I want to like have very specific kinds of experiences. Maybe just being so exposed to it now, it's like I don't know.
The novelty wears off a bit. It's less magic because you see behind the curtain, you know.
Yeah, you like wanting to have a really valuable experience every time I play a game. And
my friend Asher Volmer, who made the game Threes and is now working on Closed Castles, he was sitting at his computer on his Mac, I think, and wanted to play Warcraft 3, but didn't have it installed on that machine, and thought, maybe I can just make an RTS. So once you can do it.
So that was the inspiration for Closed Castles?
I don't know, actually. I think he mentioned it in connection to that. So
wow.
It ventured pretty far from Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
It is a real-time strategy
Still,
game,
such a cool story, though, if that's really how they connected the dots.
For me, I find that making games is like the biggest and richest and most difficult puzzle game you've ever played. Like you're playing a game and there are an infinite number of possible solutions, and there are also an infinite number of correct solutions, but it's a smaller infinity. And it's infinitely smaller, so an infinite number of things you try will be wrong. So it's like solving puzzles with just this limitless tool set where not only are there an infinite number of like possible solutions, but thousands of them are good. You know, you can think of, for any given problem, hundreds of different ways of solving it that would all individually be good in different ways. And so it's like the experience of solving a puzzle game, but the kind of games that really excite me most are things like Deus Ex, where there's a challenge and it's kind of puzzly, but there's not one solution that designers thought of, and you have to figure out what that is. There's, you know, a few main solutions, and then hundreds of variants of that, and then thousands of variants of each of those little variants. And so you can both solve the puzzle and be creative and kind of express yourself in a way. And making games is just the ultimate version of that. You can be incredibly expressive and solve crazy, complex problems. And I think I try and like pick really, really big, difficult problems and then solve them in very simple ways, and try and find the most elegant way of like solving a whole bunch of really difficult stuff with just a few simple mechanics or interactions.
Well, one thing that's interesting to me is that a lot of you are musicians, but also programmers. And I know that you put together January, right? Was that all you as well that did the coding for that?
Yeah, that was kind of my excuse to try to make a game a few years back.
That's one of my favorite things that you've done.
Thanks.
And it's not necessarily technically a game, but I always show it to my students, and they're always pretty
sweet. Yeah, it's definitely not a game.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a game.
So how did you all find then the transition from musician to developer, or did that happen in reverse order or kind of simultaneously? How did you?
It actually feels less like a transition and more just like you're just now doing this other part of the same thing. And actually, I probably should have, when we were talking earlier, I probably should have mentioned Liz Ryerson, who actually kind of did the same thing. She's like one of the best games writers, I think, and also makes really good music. And she made a game called Problematic last year. And like, it's one of those things when you're doing all the parts, if you're doing the music and then you add other stuff, it just automatically fits because it's all you. It's all like your own humanness. And you don't have to worry about like, oh no, it's not the right thing. If you just kind of like let that go, it'll just be right, and people will see you in the object. So it just feels more like like you're just reaching further out, like a blob or something.
Like another instrument to learn, or?
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly how I felt with January, because it was, you know, getting into the code side of things was, it allowed me to like extend my musical ideas into another realm, another place that I hadn't taken them, and to just try to realize all these ideas that I had musically that are not possible with just, you know, recordings.
Yeah, to me, it's like really hard to separate all this. Like, I don't know if I'm really a musician or a game maker or what am I. It's just like, I just want to do something that's
Media
cool.
Artist.
Yeah, no names, please. But yeah, I just find something that's super interesting, like game making or music making, and then I just go with it, and it's just like, I don't know how to separate it. Yeah, it's just like, I might have been like interested in building something like washing machines or something, and now I would be making washing machines with music probably if I was interested in that. Like, yeah, it's hard to separate all the things. It's just like hobbies to me. Like, everything is hobbies to me.
Well, it seems too like, because we probably all grew up as opposed to the previous generation of composers messing with computers and breaking stuff when we were kids, that seems to be even more the transition that musicians make into programming, and maybe it's not coding, but using the middleware and stuff like that, Wise and Fmod and all that.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I had a neighborhood friend who used to bring me over and show me all these games that he made, quote unquote. And then I was like asking him how he made these games, and he's like, "Oh, I have this program. It's called Res Edit. You like you can open up a game and you can like change all the insides." So he'd make all these like crazy games where he just took someone else's game and like just totally changed.
Looks a lot like Zelda.
Yeah, it totally changed the context. And when I saw that, I was like, "Oh my god, so cool!" And then I started doing that a little bit when I was little, and that was kind of like the first hook.
I think like for any person who is in some way creative or is trying to create something artistic, you're essentially trying to access some other world that is not the physical realm, and the more completely you can represent that world, the more like glorious the experiences of it. And so I think a lot of people, it's great to just like have this musical world and you're like, oh, I'm going to tap into this, and it's it's kind of a weird tonality and it's really cool, here it is. But then once you start to get into that, you're like, oh, what else is cool in this world is that everything is like purple, and it's these shapes are like this, and that's the other element, so let me do that visually. And then how do you interact with that world? And so you're trying to get the full experience of it, and a lot of times you can't really do that with just one element. And that's why the most successful and the most like impacting pieces of art are kind of cross-pollinated in some way, and are films where there's all these things coming together, or it's an album but the cover is like, you can't separate the Sgt. Pepper's cover from the album or something. It's like it's all an extremely important piece of the puzzle. So I think, yeah, it's because it's getting so easy now to do all those things. It's like that's why bands now can shoot videos. Like, how can Tyler the Creator make like an amazing video and also be able to make an amazing song? Because it's just a lot easier. The tools are there. And so, yeah, I think all creatives are sort of trying to get as much real estate as they can, because you have the power to do it, and it's the best way to get it out.
Do you guys think that's a necessity too, as an artist now, to be able to do a lot of those things, or do you find your careers maybe staying in the composing camp or programming camp, or whatever?
I don't know if it's like necessary so much as it's just like now it's allowable, and now because there are more people doing this blob thing, that's become its own like way. And if you want to focus, if that's like your natural inclination, then you should just focus. But actually, part of the blob thing, I'm gonna call it that from now on. One of the fun things is that when you sort of come across a musical idea that you can sort of only do in a game, or like it only makes sense within a game. My sort of specific, so there's this really kind of corny music technique called ducking, where you side chain like that, and it just goes that thing. But so in one of the parts of Rooftop Cop, you fall through the floors, and I built this like bootleg compressor in Game Maker, so that there's like 3 layers to the music, and when you fall through the floor, it does that. So it's just like this, like it ducks every time you go through the floor. So like, if that's not really part of the song, but it's like in like the rhythm of the game. So like, but that would it's like a thing you can really only do if you made the game yourself. You couldn't be like, hey, programmer guy, do this thing that I.
And the idea only exists because of the game,
right?
Yeah. So you wouldn't even think.
I think that's why game audio is so exciting, because you can do so much more than just record a piece. You can do like Life on a Mountain. You can't separate the music from it anymore. Like it's a game.
We did something with Gunpoint where the game revolves around. It's kind of like a noir atmosphere. You sort of look like a PI in a trench coat with a hat, and it's meant to have a lot of the atmosphere of like classic noir films. But then the stuff you do in the game is sort of near futuristic, and the main thing you do is you switch to this other mode where you can see all the electronics of a building and rewire them. And for the music, the main composer, Ryan Ike, did this fantastic sort of like cool spy movie kind of vibe with upright bass and just very like sneaky and cool. And it kind of fits the classic noir element of it, but when you switch to the crosslink mode and you see everything in this electronic view, he brings in more electronic elements in the music, and he has a kind of synthy version of each track that you'll then either be layered on top or switch to separately. So the kind of the tone of the music and the sort of instrumentation of it changes depending on which side of the game you're looking at.
Now, I know that we're all doing sort of fairly small projects. I mean, relative, not consistently, but more often than not, we're kind of working on smaller indie projects, more artistically satisfying projects. If given the opportunity to still be the creative force, would the musicians of the group, would you guys hire a musician if you could still be the creative voice and you had the budget? Would you like to work with other musicians, or do you like the control of doing it yourself?
I'd love to work with live musicians. I don't know if I'd hire a composer, but I'd love to work with like an orchestra.
Yeah, that would be nice. But yeah, I have the problem that I'm super strict about, like, I don't want anybody to touch my music. But like collaborations are super fun if it comes from the beginning. Like we're doing the Super Game Jam soundtrack, the documentary. We are doing that with those one. And that's like how we do it is we both make a bunch of songs, then send to each other and add to it, and then send it back for mixing. And that has worked really, really well because it was like the idea from the beginning. But if it's like project that I was hired for, then don't touch my music.
One of my favorite collaborators is his name is Zeke Verant, and he used to write operas. He was like a background in opera, and we both kind of do the same things. Like we both do like music and visuals, and so you think normally it's hard to work with, but we developed this thing where we would just like make stuff and send it to each other that we weren't sure about, and then we would each just like pick and be like, yes, this is good, and then we'll so it's just like it was a nice back and forth. We would usually do flip opposite things on different projects. So it's like, I don't know, it's like a personal thing. If you can find someone that you work well with, it kind of doesn't matter what parts you're doing. So
I would not give up. I'm kind of in the same boat. I was like, no way. And I went to school for film music and was like, yeah, cool, I think I want to do film. And then after a little bit realized, you know what, I hate having live musicians. I don't want to collaborate with live musicians because I already programmed it perfectly, and now you're coming in and you're telling me you can't play it. Like, I know it's physically possible, but don't give me that. But so the answer is no for me. But I know like my friend Randy Ryan, who is also here in town, got into the business to do music, and is like a composer. And it's been interesting talking with him about what now he runs a business where he basically, he hires me to do voiceover, he hires me to do music or sound or, all these things. And he's kind of his job is more of a director and kind of a producer. And he's an incredible voice director, which I never, before I got into that field, I had no idea, no respect for that profession. I didn't know there was a profession that existed. But I think there are some people who really are amazing facilitators, and they can't do, he doesn't really voice act, but he's a great composer, and for him it's kind of a struggle to, I really want to do this job because I really want to compose that music. That would be really fun. But if I hire someone else out to do it, then I can get a bunch more work and get all these people doing really great stuff and getting great results in it. So I think a lot of times it does become a struggle of staying true to that one thing that you think you do really well, or trying to expand and get a bigger piece of the pie, I guess, but give up some of your own like personal fulfillment. So it's always a battle, I think, for everyone.
Yeah. Speaking of sort of that battle, the indie creating your own content, no matter what the medium is, whether it's games or paintings or literature, it's a challenging road. I mean, how have you guys sort of collectively found your way in? I mean, Rich, for instance, obviously Fez worked out well for you, and so that's like you sort of have that footing and you can build on that. But before you hit something like a Fez, like where were you at? Like, how did you get to a position you were comfortable creating what you wanted to do for a living?
Well, I kind of started working on larger games with bigger companies, and a lot of the things about that I didn't really like. So I was looking to other avenues to find projects that would be more fulfilling, where I'd have more creative freedom, and it would be easier to connect with the other people I was working with. So in the beginning, I was, I had done some like contract gigs where there's like a stable of musicians, like composers that are each writing a couple of tracks for this one game, and none of us are getting builds of the game. We're just getting like screenshots, and we're just like, here's this like here's this picture of this level, like try to draw, like write some music for that. And then what would happen sometimes is that actually, you know, I'd have a couple of assignments and I'd write music for each of those specific areas. And then I wouldn't get to, you know, check out the music in the game until it came out. And by the time it came out, I'd be playing the game and I'd be like, oh shit, they put the wrong music in the wrong place. And because I'm so far removed from that process, I have no agency over my own work. So after that happened a couple times, and I tried to be a full-time like a studio audio person doing like sound design and music. And I didn't really like that. I didn't like having to focus on the same project over and over and over for like a long period of time. I liked working on smaller projects. So it was definitely a journey to kind of figure out, you know, what helps me to be the most productive and satisfied as a creative.
Yeah. How long have the rest of you been doing game design or development or music for games specifically?
Oh, I've been doing a bit over 3 years now, like professionally. Or professionally, I don't know what I'm doing actually. It's a really weird word.
Here we are in the professional booth.
Yeah.
I've been meaning it for 3 years.
Were you not meaning it?
I think I've been doing it for 15 and professionally for 10.
I started my first game like 4.5 years ago, but I was still working full time. And I guess this is the answer to the other question is the way I got into it was I didn't get into it until I'd already had a success doing it in my spare time. So I just worked weekends and making Gunpoint for 3 years. And that's way longer than a game of that size should take, but I didn't have to risk anything to do it. I still had my full-time job, and I kept it totally compartmentalized. And then only after it was already out and successful did I actually quit my job and go indie. So that was like I say, that was 1 and a bit years ago. So it was 3 years working my spare time, and I've been full-time for 1.5 years.
I mean, I guess two years for me. I kind of just did like a life 180 where I just was like, I'm going to do something else.
I'm familiar with those.
And,
I've had a couple of them, actually. Does that mean I'm back where I started? I don't know.
There you go.
I don't think so.
But I co-organized this DIY games space called Baby Castles, and we just got a gallery in Manhattan. So it's kind of just like forming a community, and like having that stuff around just helped a lot. Just, you know, it's like, what do I want to do? And then you go and figure that out.
Well, yeah, the cool thing about the community, even just us here, happened over Twitter in like the last 2 days, and that we all just got together and hung out for an hour. I mean, how cool is that? And I know that the Grim Fandango thing is happening pretty soon, so we don't want to keep you guys too much longer, because I could sit here and talk forever. So maybe we can continue this chat offline or something. But I really we wanted to thank you guys for all coming in and making this happen, because it was a lot of fun for us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess, should we officially just sign off and say goodbye to everybody?
Goodbye.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
everyone, for coming in, and we'll sign off and catch y'all later.